Thanks. My name's Tim. I'm an addict. So my last drink or drug was on the 24th of July, 1993. So I've been without a drink or a drug for 31 years. That wasn't... It's a little round of applause for God there. Certainly not for me. I'm a mess. That wasn't the first time I tried to get sober. The first time I tried to get sober was in 1990. So alcohol was the main drug. There were other things too, and there have been lots of other behaviors as well. I'm tricky. You can't leave me alone with anything. As I was saying to a couple of people, I'm not a conventions person. I don't normally like conventions, but this is cracking, if you'll pardon the pun. Because there's a bit of fire in the room, and I like that, and fire keeps me warm. My addiction is very, very straightforward. Whatever it is, I do too much of it. That phrase, too much, is not straightforward, though. When I was drinking and using, there were people that were consuming the same amount as me, but were fine. And I've sponsored people who I think consumed a lot less than me, but really weren't fine. Too much means too much for me. Now, when I first read the Big Book, which was in 1993, I didn't identify with what I felt was a main theme running through it, which was drinking against my will. The reason being, whenever I had the option to drink in front of me, it seemed like it's what I wanted to do. So how is that against my will? I never met a drink I didn't like. I've never taken a drug which didn't seem like a really good idea at the time. In the moment of doing it, there was no conflict. It was just, this is the only option on the table, so here we go. How is that drinking against my will? And if I'm not drinking against my will, how am I powerless? I'm doing exactly what I want to do when I want to do it. How is that powerless? Makes no sense. I wasn't taken through the Big Book. I was given it to read, and I think they said, read it. That was the extent of the instructions. And then they said, have you read it? And I said, yes, and that was the end of the conversation. What the book talks about, however, is this funny sort of madness which descends like a fog. And in that fog, a drink seems like a good idea. To ask whether I was drinking or using in accordance with my will or against my will, you can't use that moment before drinking or using to test it out, because that won't prove anything. There are three ways of testing whether my drinking or using was in accordance with my will or against my will. The first thing was it in my own best interests? Well, the answer to that was very clearly no, as the policeman who would arrest me would agree. The second test is, did I do what I intended to do? The third is when I woke up the next morning, was I glad about the course of events that had taken place? I never woke up in the morning thinking, I wish I'd drunk more yesterday. I always woke up thinking, I wish I hadn't drunk what I drunk, did what I did. And it's those three things, the fact it wasn't what I intended, I regretted it afterwards, and it was against my own best interests. Don't ask what I was thinking in the run-up to the drink or the drug, because I'm in the madness then, as they say. And you don't ask the mad person. You have to stand back from it. And this all struck me when a few years ago I heard a friend of mine say, he reported his father saying to him, a casual observer might conclude, son, that you're not acting in your own best interests, that you don't have your own best interests at heart. And I think that was a very good way of putting it. Cunning, baffling, and powerful are three very helpful words. It's baffling because when you can see it so clearly in someone else, why on earth would you be doing that? Why on earth would you think that? Cunning because smart people are taken in by it as much as anyone. And powerful. Forest fires are interesting phenomena. There can be 100 reasons why the first flame takes. Is it chemicals? Is it a car crash? Is it someone discarding a cigarette end? Is it a barbecue? Lightning? Lots of reasons. But once the fire starts, the way the fire propagates from tree to tree, from bush to bush, is the same for any forest fire anywhere in the world. And it doesn't matter how it started. Once it starts, and you listen to the news on forest fires, and you can have hundreds of firefighters working, but they have to wait till the wind changes or it rains. There's a little bit they can do, but really it's the weather that's going to stop this. And it's like that with me and drinking and using. If I start, I can stand a bad night out. What terrifies me is the idea of starting again and it taking years, if not decades, for me to stop, if I ever stop. I remember saying to someone, for me, to drink is to die. I was going through one of my dramatic, pompous phases. Some might say I've never left that particular phase. And the AA member who I was talking to said about drinking and dying, she said, if you're lucky. In modern English, we have the word death. And that covers everything from dying in your bed to the most horrific imaginable deaths. In Old English, and when they were speaking Old English, things were, you think Birmingham's rough. 12 centuries ago was rough. And they had two different words for death. There was death, ordinary death, and there was a word, kwalu, which meant a violent death. Alcoholism gives rise to very violent deaths, and I don't just mean being beaten up or stabbed, but just the awfulness of it. If you've watched friends die, how slow it is on occasion, the twists and turns, the false hopes, the little dawns, the moments you think, oh, they've got it now, they're on their way back, and then they're not. I don't want to reactivate that. If it gets reactivated, I don't bring myself back. There's a wonderful line in Bill's story where he says, I was separated from alcohol for the last time. Not, I separated myself. No. You have to wait for it to let go and then hope that the right people are around you to help you out of it. And even then, I had a friend who relapsed, and he managed to get himself, I think, 8 times into hospital over the course of a few weeks, and each time he was either thrown out of the hospital or he discharged himself. So you can even place someone in the right environment. You're not out of the woods yet. So my job now is to make sure that my addiction never gets reactivated. If it is reactivated, God only help me. Now, the young people in here won't get this point, but in the late 70s or maybe early 80s, there was a dreadful children's program called The Adventure Game. And one of the features of the adventure game, there was this kind of matrix of like diamond shapes, and someone had to go from one side to the other side. And they had to choose to go to the left to the next square or go to the right to the next square. And if they went to the wrong square, they would be zapped out of existence. If they went to the correct side, they'd be fine. And gradually they made their way across, and sometimes they got zapped. I can say things in CA that I can't say in AA because I don't want to be controversial in AA. But there's a line that people use sometimes. There are as many ways to stay sober as there are people in recovery. Between you and me, I don't think that's true. I may be wrong. Now, what do I mean by that? Of course, everyone does it slightly differently. You get 100 people who are, big book seal of approval, and everyone's got a slightly different take. Everyone's got a slightly different angle. Everyone's got slightly different definitions. They put together the puzzle pieces slightly differently, or sometimes radically differently, but it's all coming from the same book. It's clear-cut directions up to a point, but once you reach that point, after that, it's left to the discretion of the practitioner of the steps. Step 5 is a really good example. It says it's a long conversation. How long is long? 40 minutes or 3 days? Both would count as a long conversation. Every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. Again, is that a 40-minute conversation or a 3-day conversation? People interpret that differently. It leaves some things open. With step 9, it leaves the precise method in a particular case of how to make amends open. It's not prescriptive. It says, we don't like to lay down any rule of any sort. Interesting. You might tell that to some groups. What's the point? The point is that there are some things which work, there are some things which don't work. Within the range of things which work, there's some variation. There's a line in the book where it says, half measures availed us nothing. But that nothing, the result was nil until we let go absolutely. It looks pretty devastating. When I put a foot wrong in AA, it's not like the adventure game. I don't get zapped straight away. I put a foot wrong, nothing happens. I put another foot wrong, nothing happens. I stop going to meetings, nothing happens. Eerie. And you start to think everything they said, I was sold a bill of goods there. It's not true. Very clearly, you can drift a long way and it's fine. And as one travels around the world of recovery, different meetings, different places, different fellowships, my observation is that a lot of people don't do what is said in the big book and are staying sober perfectly well, thank you very much. for now. And that's the point, is that I think alcoholism is terrifying because it can be very slow. When I was very new, I was on a short leash indeed. If I started to drift at all, I remember one day in my first year, I didn't go to a meeting that day thinking, I can not go to a meeting for a day. What's going to happen to me? And I went completely mad. And by 11 o'clock that night, I was suicidal. And I thought, I better not try that for a while, and I didn't. I'm on a very short leash. Although, when I was 7 or 8 years sober, I drifted and I stopped going to meetings for a while. And it took a while for the curse to burn its way through into my life. It took me a while and it was only when I was in a situation around 9.5 years, you have to use your imagination to think what might be behind that word. I was in a situation where the person I was with was taking cocaine and very much wanted me to take cocaine, and I dithered. And I got out of that situation and I got home and I was fine. But it scared the bejesus out of me, because I'd got there through 1,000 little steps away from recovery, each one of which seemed perfectly reasonable, perfectly rational, and did not give me any cause for concern or worry or disturbance. So the things I'm asked to do in AA, it's the same. I won't necessarily get a benefit straight away. I remember a meeting I went to many years ago, which was a home group at the time. I have to say I wasn't a great fan of it. It was local, it was convenient, it was at a good time. There were some newcomers there. I didn't understand why I was going there, because I didn't like the sharing, they didn't like my sharing. Chalk and cheese. Until one day I realized I had some secrets, and I had a step 5, I'd done a step 4, I had couple of step 5s booked. I was going to do step 5 with 3 different people. And the first step 5 was booked about 10 days hence, and the thought occurred to me, how do I know I'm going to stay sober between now and then, holding on to these secrets? And I thought, when a thought crosses your mind and you know what you have to do. Footnote, sometimes people say, I don't feel the presence of God. If ever you get a very strong feeling that you know what the right thing is to do and you really don't want to do it, but you know you have to do it, you're in conscious contact with God. There's not going to be a flash, there's not going to be bright lights, there's not going to be a vision. It's going to be the conscience. And I knew I had to convey these secrets to this bunch of people I did not like, but were members of my home group, which I'd been going to for reasons I didn't understand. But I realized once I conveyed the little secrets and no one batted an eyelid and I was fine, I realized I'd built the venue for doing that by going to that meeting week in, week out for a couple of years. And maybe the reason I did that was to give me the ability to say the secrets that I needed to say in that situation. I don't necessarily see the benefits of the things that I do in recovery until years later. So when I do the wrong thing, I don't get an immediate negative payoff. When I do the right thing, I don't get an immediate positive payoff. Sometimes the wrong thing is really comfortable. Sometimes the right thing is really uncomfortable. And I don't have to make many decisions in my life these days because my life is just very orderly and stable, and I've been in the same job for a long time. I've been with the same person for a long time. I've lived in the same flat for a long time. But when decisions need to be made, I'm very cautious about, I think the phrase people use is thinking it through, because I can argue anything is the right thing. Anything. I've argued my way into AA, I've argued my way out of AA, I've argued my way into jobs or even careers which were a catastrophe. And things seem like a good idea to me when they're not. And this is why I think the whole of the program is about one thing and one thing only, which is forming a relationship with God. I had a conversation with someone a couple of weeks ago who was saying that they'd had some problems with religion during their childhood, and they were struggling with step 2, and could they have some help? And I thought, we'll see, and we had a little conversation. And it turned out that they thought that anyone who believed in God was very stupid, and it was very clear that God didn't exist, and they gave some reasons why God didn't exist. And I was a little blunt that day, I have to admit, and I said, whilst you're still producing words, there is no hope. When you stop producing words, there might be hope. While I'm still paying attention to what my own mind is telling me, when I'm still the final authority in my life, when I'm still talking about me and what I think, there's no room for anything else. There's a wonderful line in the 12 and 12. It says, when our scorecards read 0, and you throw up your hands and you think, I got nothing. Nothing. I don't care. Just show me what to do. I don't even need to be told what to believe. Just give me something to do. I'll do that. And then give it 5 years and then we'll see. I'm going to give it a minute before I assess anything, because I'm just done. Anyway, nice chap. I know him. He's lovely. We get on very well. But in this conversation, he then said, so what you want me to do is simply believe in God, even though I think there's no more chance that God can keep me clean and sober than leprechauns. I thought, okay, so that's what we're dealing with, that type of hostility. Fine. And I had one more card to play, because I don't argue any of those things. I don't get in there on the topic of whether God exists or not. My bones are old and I've got limited wind, and I just can't. Because it doesn't work anyway, apart from anything. And I said, are you happy? I thought, this will get him. And he said, the more I work the program, the happier I am. I thought, well, good for you. I said, well, I'm going to wish you well in your recovery. And that was the end of that. If someone is doing well without God, my hat is off to you. Good luck to you. Nothing I have to offer is of any use to you whatsoever. Clearly something is working. Carry on doing that. On a regular basis, I discover I have nothing to turn to except God. I can't think it through one more time. I can't even read any literature. I can't read any spiritual literature, especially. Sometimes trying to feed me spiritual literature is when you're trying to feed a baby with a little spoon with some mushy food on it, and wherever you poke the spoon, its head turns and the food goes on its cheek. It just won't go in the mouth. The child does not want to eat. I can be like that. And I just have to go straight to the source and say, show me what to do. And then what comes back is not logical argument or anything clever or anything considered. It's just, this is the next thing to do. This is the next thing to do. One of my favorite lines in the big book is on page 87, where it says, when doubtful or agitated, we ask for the right thought or action. This means that my horizon stops immediately beyond the next thing I'm supposed to think or the next thing I'm supposed to do. I grew up in a family which was greatly affected by alcoholism. My life is swamped with people with alcoholism and addiction of every available hue. I'm very much a candidate for Al-Anon, and Al-Anon has been part of my life as well for 29 years. And part of the Al-Anon problem is being in such a devastated state of undernutrition in every imaginable way that you look at the world, keeping an eye on everything going on in the world to spot every single danger, so you can make a list of all the dangers, then you make a list of all the things you do for all the dangers, and then once you get everything done on all of the lists, you'll be safe. If you identify with that remotely, just run from the building to Al-Anon, as well as CA. And it doesn't work. The wolves cannot be kept from the door. However many you shoot, there's always another one dashing through the snow. And I can't mentally keep an eye on everything. It's too exhausting, which is why the big book reduces my focus to the next thought and the next action. Beyond that, I don't know. And that frees up the whole day. In job interviews, they're fond of asking questions like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I'm really glad that the way I make a living, I don't have to go to job interviews, because they'd get short shrift in response to that question. They would get an answer they hadn't bargained for. I cannot afford to see myself anywhere. I should not be the focus of my attention. And what I'm going to say is immediately now is I think very unfashionable for our day and age. I had a lot of, problems when I got sober. Problems other than alcohol, and problems other than drugs, and problems other than addiction. I was very unwell mentally and emotionally, and of course spiritually and socially, and I did not know how to handle food and money and accommodation and work and other people and religion and anything. But most significantly, I was very unwell. And these days, if you want to, you can get lots of names for the unwellness. When I was new in AA, there was only one word for it, which was, you're fucked. And I was under the impression for a long time that I needed to figure out what was wrong with me so I could fix it. And although to a certain extent a few things have come clear over the years, most of those things have not been solved by me thinking them through and learning anything with erudite people and so on. That's not the case. I mean, I haven't had depression for many years. I haven't had anxiety for many years. I haven't had a panic attack for 17, 18 years. I haven't been arrested for a very long time, which is great. I don't have any manifestations these days of any of those mental illnesses. And I kept professionals busy for a while. I should not be okay, but I really am okay. I wake up at the moment at 5:30 in the morning, thrilled to be alive, looking forward to the day, full of beans, full of energy, and excited about all the things I'm going to get done. Of course, I still have moral problems, which is why I have to do a regular daily moral inventory. But I do not have mental problems anymore, and haven't for a long time. So the question which I ask myself is, why not? And it is not because I've solved them, it's because I've been given something else to do. And whilst I've been doing those other things, the mind seems to have healed itself, because it hasn't had me staring at it, nagging at it, pulling at it, poring over it, carving it up with a knife and a fork, trying to work out what's wrong with it. I've simply left it be. So what do you do instead? You carry this message to other addicts. And someone made the point earlier, and I think it was very well made, that while service is very good, service is what enables the message to be carried, but it is not the carrying of the message itself. The direct work one-on-one with other alcoholics and subsidiary things like this, events where I'm speaking to you, that's in a sense one-on-one multiplied across the room. But really the one-on-one thing is very important. It's all based on trust, the confidence that the other person gets you, and therefore you can trust what they're saying, and you can trust their confidence in the effectiveness of the program. That seems to be the thing which has given my life a purpose and a sense of satisfaction, which certainly nothing material or worldly, even perfectly honest things like a job or a career or a family, those are good things. They're very good and important things in one sense. But they don't spell the necessary spiritual awakening. There is something about carrying the message which makes me aware that there is a greater reality in operation, and all that is going on in the material world is a show taking place on the theatre stage. In a theatre, the show that is going on really is going on. It's not an illusion. It's happening. The play is taking place. There's flesh and blood on the stage acting out the scenes. But what is going on in the theatre is a fragment of what is going on in the universe. And the actors are more important than their parts. For years I was an actor who thought that the parts I was playing, the various roles in my life, were me, and they weren't. They're just where I am. They're what I'm doing. They're not who I am. That contact with a higher reality, presided over by God, from that position, I appear to be safe from my addictions being reactivated. This care and protection of God business, I'm working with a lot of people on step one at the moment. Very slowly, to their consternation, they want to tick the box and get through it, and I'm no. We're gonna do this properly. And one theme which comes through in people's work again and again and again is, when it says, for instance, we had to follow that the person can stay sober if he follows a few simple rules. And person after person, I said, what are the rules? They say, believing in God. Believing in God will do nothing on its own. Working for God will do something, even if you don't believe in God. It is the action which brings about the belief itself. So in working for God, there's nothing grand or highfalutin about it. It's simply waking up in the morning and turning up for work with God, saying, what do you want me to do today? And one simply has to go with one's instinct on this. Inspiration, and intuitive thought, or a decision. Not following schemes or rules or systems, but saying, God, what do you want me to do? And making the decision that I will be satisfied with whatever it is. If what it is doing the dishes, very good. If what it is a piece of work which someone is pleased with, very good. If what it is a piece of work and they are indifferent or even unhappy for no good reason, very good. My job at home with my other half is to be available, to show up, to do good looking after, as a friend of mine puts it. And sometimes there is a tremendous response from my other half. Sometimes there's nothing. He's got stuff going on and he hasn't got any energy to give to others once he gets home from work because it's all spent. So in that situation, how do I serve God? I treat it like Downton Abbey. I'm downstairs, he's above stairs. My job is simply to be the discreet servant, do what needs to be done. I'm owed nothing by anyone. I'm owed everything by God, but I need to fulfill my side of the bargain. This really is a high-stakes game. It's all or nothing. Am I going to trust the world or am I going to trust God? And trusting God again and again and again and increasingly has meant I can't play by the world's rules. I can't bullshit. I can't lie. I can't subscribe to values I don't believe in. I can be diplomatic and discreet, but I can't play the games. And I've often said no to work opportunities because ethically or spiritually it is not the right thing. And my good common sense says you're insane, you're running away from real life, you're running away from the world, you're hiding in a spiritual fantasy land. This is just unconscious avoidance. But I trust God and everything is worked out. Work is absolutely fine. I've got enough money. It shouldn't work the way it works. It talks about common sense becoming uncommon sense. So I'm very happy with what recovery has enabled in me. I'm very pleased I have a relationship with God. And I'm going to finish on this point. Someone made the point, I think, very well about the higher power versus God can be on occasion a way of avoiding. Higher power sounds very abstract. God is personal. I don't know about anyone else. If you're fine with an abstract spirit of the universe, good for you. I don't want to disturb that. But I'm reporting that I need a personal relationship with God, and I need to feel that that God is personally, actively interested in my life. I don't know why that's the case, but it is the case. But that is the God that's available to me today. Thanks for listening.